As I leave the bench this year, I leave with a grateful heart. It has been an adventure, and I have been blessed, to say the least. I was the beneficiary of some very strong women in my background. My grandmother, my mother. I had a father that encouraged me to do whatever I wanted. My sixth grade teacher told me I would make a good lawyer. I thought about it. It surfaced again, and I thought, okay, I'm either going to take all my resources and go bum around Europe for as long as my money holds out, and I'll apply to one law school. If I get into law school, I'll go to law school. If I don't get into law school, it'll be a one-way trip to Europe. I got into law school.
My name is Tom Picorni, and I met Chief Justice O'Connor in our first year of law school together at Cleveland Marshall College of Law. I would venture to say that my freshman year of law school, the women represented less than 10% of the makeup of the classes.
I was busy with non-traditional things to do, so to speak, in law school. I had my first son after my second year, and I had my second son the day after I graduated.
People might ask, what was she like then as compared to the way that the chief is today? And the answer is, she's exactly the same. She was, in those days, very unflappable.
My name is Judge Patricia A. Cosgrove, and I first met Chief Justice Maureen OConnor in the 1980s. I don't think people understand how committed she is to making sure that people who are poor can have the same access and the same quality of justice as someone who is rich. It doesn't matter. She worked hard to put everybody on the same level playing field.
My name is Linda Tucci Teodosio. I'm the judge in the Summit County Juvenile Court here in Akron. I've known the Chief Justice for many, many years, dating back to the time where she was what we then called a referee. A referee was what we called magistrates back in the 70s and 80s.
I learned so much being a magistrate, and certainly about the law, but how you deal with tough cases, how you deal with people who are maybe at the lowest ebb of their lives. It just is an education unlike any other experiences, I think.
She is one of the most astute politicians you will ever meet in your life. And I say that with complete respect. And I'm a Democrat, and she's a Republican, and I have always admired her.
I learned running for judge is a very difficult thing to do. And one of the hardest things is to generate interest in the campaign. This is something I tell students, keep your options open for yourself, because life is not necessarily a straight line from A to Z. A lot of times opportunities present themselves. So whether you're asked and then you think to yourself, why not me? Or you discover it, on your own and you ask yourself the same question, why not me? And I've kind of pursued that line of thinking in my career. I loved being a common pleas court judge. And my thought process there was, it's really important on who the next county prosecutor will be. It's too important of a job to just let go to anybody. So I will resign from being a judge right now, become the county prosecutor for maybe 2-3 terms, and then go back on the bench and finish out my career as a common pleas court judge. Because again, I really enjoyed it. And that's not what happened.
She indicated that she wanted to leave the Summit County Common Pleas bench as a judge and be a prosecutor. And I remember this conversation. I'm Maureen, why do you want to, leave a judgeship and become the county prosecutor? And her answer was that she wanted to gain a more in-depth understanding of the criminal justice system and how it can be improved to make sure that it was fair for everyone.
Honestly, I remember being flabbergasted that she would give up the judge job to become the prosecutor, but it did open up a lot of political opportunity.
I spent 4 years as the director of the Summit County Child Support Enforcement Agency, reporting directly to Maureen when she was the Summit County prosecutor.
Child Support Enforcement Agency is really an important operation in our state. There's only one institution that interacts more with children than the Child Support Enforcement Agency, and that's our education system. So it's second to only our education system.
Child support was a big problem.
When I assumed office in January of 1995 as Summit County Prosecutor, our child support enforcement agency ranked 87th out of 88 counties in Ohio for its collection rate.
People told me, don't become county prosecutor. The child support enforcement agency is a mess. You'll ruin your career if you take this job. I thought, you know what? There's only one way to go, and that's up. So I took the job. About 2 years later, we were nominated for 2 national awards.
I met her in Summit County, just making the rounds and campaigning for governor, and because she was a prominent elected official in Summit County.
I was asked to be lieutenant governor to run with Bob Taft, and I thought to myself, it's kind of a win-win situation for me.
She was used to campaigning. She'd won a number of times in Summit County, which is a large county, so she was accustomed to, parades and county fairs and picnics, and so she was a very vigorous campaigner.
We were political opponents. That was 1998. I was running for governor, and she was running for lieutenant governor, so we saw each other constantly on the campaign trail. In fact, we even found out during that campaign that we had the same birthday and even the same year, which we will not reveal on this video. She won that election. She and Bob Taft won that election. We lost. Just as I'm friends with Bob Taft today, I'm also friends with Chief Justice Maureen OConnor today as well.
Of the state of Ohio.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Congratulations.
It is somewhat traditional for a lieutenant governor to also serve as a cabinet director. The department that really fitted her background was to be director of the Ohio Department of Public Safety.
I enjoyed the territory of public safety. I think we made some pretty positive progress in some of the areas of especially Bureau of Motor Vehicles.
She wanted me to come to Columbus. It was kind of like, you really helped me there, and I'd like to do it again and repeat it. We have some of the same issues at the Bureau of Motor Vehicles.
He left the Child Support Enforcement Agency shortly after, and he agreed to come to Columbus and work in the Bureau of Motor Vehicles. And we implemented a lot of changes. It was important to make sure that people were serviced, because that's why we're here. We're public servants. Now, if you go into deputy registrars, you take a number. You got me to thank for that. Another thing we did, O-plates. You can register your vehicles online, get your license plates. You don't even have to go in the Bureau. That happened when I was director of the Department of Public Safety.
Today is a day that will live in infamy, not since 1941, when President Roosevelt spoke those words in the aftermath of Pearl Harbor, has this nation experienced such a deliberate and destructive attack as occurred earlier today.
I remember being in my office and somebody came in and said, oh, we got to turn the TV on. And they were showing a rerun of the first plane attacking the tower. I looked at it, I said, that's intentional. That's not an accident. And then the second one, live, and I said, we're under attack.
Maureen OConnor, Director of Public Safety, Lieutenant Governor, was our point person on Homeland Security.
Nobody knew what was happening, but I have to say that Washington organized rather quickly, and they set up, Homeland Security, and I became the liaison with Homeland Security.
It's hard to imagine a more awful, cataclysmic scene. But Ohio Lieutenant Governor Maureen OConnor says the pictures don't do the devastation justice. She should know she was there, visiting Ohioans involved in the rescue effort.
The magnitude, the immense amount of damage that has been done there is incomprehensible.
You would walk down the street and there was still ash and dust all through the air. The facades off of buildings, and all you saw were the floors and, and the office buildings, all their furniture and everything was, there, but there was no front on the building because it had just slipped off, blown off. And I went up into a building and it was as though people had just put their things down and left. There were sweaters over the back of chairs. That's how quickly people evacuated. And it really gave you a sense of the panic. I will never forget that day. We loaded it on the plane and we took letters from their families for our search and rescue team and delivered, to them. And that was just, that was overwhelming for them. And It's probably one of the best things I've done as an office holder. I still get choked up thinking about that because it was so, God, that was so emotional. It really was.
The most hard-fought campaigns this year may well have been the ones for Ohio Supreme Court. Incumbent Evelyn Lundberg Stratton and Lieutenant Governor Maureen OConnor both were victorious.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I am very humbled by our victory this evening.
I'm Ronald B Adrian. I'm a former judge of the Cleveland Municipal Court. I've known the chief since she reached the Supreme Court. I think when we're talking about Chief Justice O'Connor's opinions, what comes through for me is her sincerity, the amount of time and effort that she clearly has put into coming to the position that she's come to. I think that a lot of the opinions that she's put out there are going to stand the test of time.
Her writing is clear. You get the feeling when you're reading an opinion Maureen OConnor has written that she wants to make sure the public, especially the non-law trained public, can understand what the law is, which frankly is one of the most important parts of the decision-making job.
One of the most, I guess, famous cases that I was involved with was Norwood versus Horney.
The next case on our calendar is 05-227 and 228, City of Norwood versus Joseph Horney.
Your Honors, this is obviously a case of great importance.
It was a good property rights case.
I remember coming over here to my property and seeing all the eviction notices taped to my door. I had 90 days to leave my property. The City of Norwood said, you've got to go because we've got someone else that's going to put some grand apartments in here to replace yours.
What all of this is in the end measured against is their personal property rights versus the public welfare.
When Dana Berliner called me from the Institute for Justice and she said it was unanimous, I knew we won. There was not one justice that sat there in that court in Columbus and questioned that we were right.
It preserved property rights in the state of Ohio. There's other states that have followed, what Ohio did. It's a case that's in both property law books and also in constitutional law books.
My name is Judith Ann Lanzinger. I am a justice retired from the Supreme Court. I know Chief Justice O'Connor in many capacities as a former colleague, but most of all as a good, dear friend. Chief Justice Moyer at one point had the two of us for lunch, and we were talking, and the Chief Justice Moyer said, I could see you becoming chief, saying that to Maureen. It turned out that he would have been extremely pleased to know that his wish came true.
I look back, in the darkest time on this court for me was when Chief Justice Moyer died.
Good afternoon. Much tribute has been paid to the chief for his scholarship, for his leadership, and of course, for his vision. Yes, the chief was a leader, and he was the embodiment of all things that are good for the judiciary. But he was also a friend.
He was just a delightful person who could talk about so much because he was so interested in life.
Hear ye, hear ye, hear ye. The Honorable Supreme Court of Ohio is now in open session pursuant to adjournment.
Welcome to all of you to today's historic ceremony.
I regretted that day my mother wasn't there. Also, I think, my grandparents and, my father, because they all had sung the same tune. You can be whatever you want. And to see their daughter and granddaughter become the first woman to hold this job in the history of the state of Ohio would have been something, I think.
This I do.
This I do.
As I shall answer unto God.
As I shall answer unto God.
Congratulations.
When I think about this job, I think about the example that it's set for kids in this state. And I don't mean just girls, because I think it's equally as important for young boys to see women in strong positions.
She serves as a role model and always has served as a role model to women, that you can be strong without being angry. You can be right without being righteous.
Everyone says she's the first female justice, and that's a wonderful thing, but that's just the beginning of who she is and what she brings to the court.
I think being part of Ohio's history, I don't know that it caused her to lead any differently. She is who she is. The earliest memory I have of the chief is, it cracks me up. I get this call, and I answer the phone, and she goes, "Yvette, this is Maureen OConnor." And I was like, "Yes? Why are you calling me?" I was like, I knew who she was, but I didn't have a relationship with her. And she said, "Listen, I've heard that you are thinking about not taking this appointment, and that is the wrong decision." And I was like, "Yes, ma'am." And that was literally my first conversation with her. And then she invited me to the court to come and talk to her, and we just kind of hit it off. So my husband still cracks up about that. He said, "I've never seen you sit so straight." So.
She's someone who sees a big problem facing our courts and our judges and runs towards it instead of away from it.
Monday afternoon during our regular weekly meetings, I think both of us recognized that the opioid crisis that was beginning to really explode in Ohio and throughout the upper Midwest was not a crisis that was confined to the borders of a state.
Maureen decided that she was not going to be doing the work in Ohio. She called all the surrounding states together and started a regional judicial opioid initiative. So we shared information.
At a meeting in Cincinnati, the idea to bring this group together was, let's see how we can collaborate, how we can kind of like break down some barriers. There's certain things that would be helpful for us all to know.
We've seen these regional judicial opioid initiatives spring up in other areas of the country modeled after it. We finally had attorney generals talking to each other on the crisis. We had pharmacy boards talking to each other on the crisis. We had judges from multiple states talking to each other on the crisis.
I really appreciate the Chief Justice's focus on drug courts. We've seen them work very well. We have judges across the state who have really done just a phenomenal job.
It's a constant battle. It will be a constant battle.
The Chief's got a fairly unique ability to pull people together.
She not only thinks about the problem to begin with, but she gets input from others.
The unique thing about being the Chief Justice is you really have leadership responsibility for the administration of the courts of the state. And I always say, the public is familiar with our decision-making work. That's the work they read about in the paper. They hear, this case or that case is going to the Supreme Court, and they can follow that. What they don't always appreciate is what a big job the administrative work is. It's a stunning amount of work with all kinds of complex problems.
I know that she cares, as do I, that judges should be able to make decisions based on the law and the person in front of them. And that we have to make sure that the judicial system always is seen as a place of fairness.
Access to justice means so many different things to different people, and it really has to mean equal access to the resources that our justice system has. And I don't think that there's any dispute that over the many years of this country, the access to justice has been denied many, many people, and it continues to be denied. It's something that we've got to fix.
She has that fundamental philosophy that you've got to use your power to convene, to get behind the bench, to make your communities, both local and state, stronger. We have an obligation as public servants and judges to do more.
I think bail reform is morally necessary. For too long, we just accepted the fact that we can hold people in jail and put a dollar amount on their release. It's a pretty inequitable system. It's something that I worked on with the National Center of State Courts.
Michigan, like many other states, and including Ohio, was suffering a public confidence problem because of the assessment of fines and fees. So the former Chief Justice of the Michigan Supreme Court assigned me to work on this problem in Michigan. I was pretty new to the bench and thought, wow, this is a big one. Do I start from scratch? Where do I go from here? And it turns out I didn't have to start from scratch at all. In fact, Maureen OConnor had already put together the information, the data, the research, and really practical tools to help our trial judges with doing a much better job with fines and fees. And so I wasn't even a chief yet, but I reached out to her, and she was happy that her work would benefit people in states other than her own.
She has a tremendous drive, and something that we talk about all the time, which is you are a public servant. She truly believes in serving the public.
I don't think most citizens in Ohio realize how committed she was to improving the technology of the courts.
She did a really good job in so many ways and took that job very seriously, and a lot of initiatives came out of her efforts as Chief Justice on the death penalty, on bail reform, providing local courts with the technology needed to keep going.
This afternoon, we learned that 3 Ohioans have tested positive for COVID-19.
It was a culture shock for our courts, as it was for every other institution.
This is an unprecedented time, undoubtedly, a time when during which the judiciary of Ohio, as well as the bar, the state and local leaders must come together to guarantee the vital and continued operation of the state's judicial system and the public's access to justice.
It quickly became obvious that we needed to enhance the locals' capacity to do remote hearings. And that's when, I started giving away money from our budget to the locals to beef up their technology through our tech grants.
The amount of work that they put in the first 3 months of this pandemic to get us all to a point where for the next year, so to speak, we were able to function basically as if nothing else was going on.
Putting in funds so people could have the resources to operate remotely with Zoom and other video conferencing, I thought was amazing.
Courts never closed during the COVID crisis.
We have a health crisis to deal with, and we do not know when it will end. But we also have a long overdue mission separate from that crisis. That mission is to seek out new and higher levels of the fair administration of justice and access to justice for all who come before our courts.
I just like things to be fair for everybody. I'd like, access to all things good for people. All of our institutions to realize that they're there for everybody and not just, the few.
I think what her legacy will be beyond being the first woman will be what she did with redistricting. She's done a lot of things, whether it's access to justice, bail bonds and fees, pay raises for judges, modernizing the court. But at the end of the day, I think what people will be proud of for their first female Chief Justice is that she was unafraid.
The state of Ohio is going to miss her because she's a real leader. It's not somebody that puts a finger in the air to try to figure out which way the wind is blowing. She reaches down deep to figure out what's best for the people of our state.
You can only aspire to be, part of what she is. If I could get done a part of what Maureen's getting done, to better the lives of those that use our justice system, then it'd be a life well led.
Ladies and gentlemen, that was the last case I will hear from this bench as Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of Ohio. It's been an honor and a privilege to serve the people of Ohio alongside my judicial colleagues. Since 2003, I have served with 20 justices on this bench. I've heard over 2,500 oral arguments, written 421 majority opinions. While justices have not always agreed, that is part of the process as well. With an open mind and an open heart, we have decided important issues, navigated a global pandemic, and returned to do more. God bless you, and God bless the best system of justice in Ohio. Marshal, will you adjourn court?
All right. Hear ye, hear ye, hear ye. This open session of the Honorable Supreme Court of Ohio now stands adjourned.
If you have a talent, you should use it to do good.